Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Unbreakable Glass shares how he broke into a competitive finance leadership development program in a large hospital network in the Midwest. We cover what his parents did for him, finding your purpose, and the benefits of not chasing the same path as everyone else. Enjoy. Unbreakable Glass, thank you so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Pat.
So it'd be great if you could just start with a quick summary of your background for the listeners.
Yeah, so I'm from a Midwest town. I was first generation college, went to a non-target, and that alone was just a big deal of going to school at all. Didn't have a whole lot of guidance on how to land any kind of job post-school. I found Wall Street Oasis because I was studying finance at the time, and one of the pieces of advice that everyone gave was to just make a premium LinkedIn account and message everybody that you knew in your network who went to a similar school and might have some things in common with you. So I just started shooting off tons of messages. Only had one response, and it got me into a family office.
Can you tell me before you go there, can you tell me how many messages you sent when you only got one response, approximately?
Probably 100. I mean,
Okay.
I was sending messages all the time because I found out about investment banking and just high finance sort of jobs, and thought that that's exactly where I wanted to be. So I was finding any minuscule, sorry, my phone is on. Finding any sort of minuscule connection I have with people.
Right.
Whether it was we went to the same school, we were from the same city, a friend of a friend, anything at all that I could possibly connect with somebody on.
And when did you start doing this? You said junior year you started doing this?
This would have been sophomore to junior year, somewhere in that time
So
frame.
you weren't super late or anything like that. It was just that you came from a super non-target, and there wasn't in your kind of Midwest, so there's not as many seats necessarily.
Correct.
As like in New York.
Yeah, and I didn't have any guidance. So my school isn't known for finance. My parents didn't go to college.
Yeah.
I didn't have many mentors in my life who could help me like get on the right path.
Right.
And so, it was just I didn't have any kind of mentorship along the way. It was kind of me finding my own path and really using Wall Street Oasis as like my only launching pad.
Did you try getting a mentor? Did you try reaching out to people and like asking, or did you feel like, well, I guess you only got one response. So that answers that question, right? You got one response, and tell me about that one response.
Yeah. So it was one guy who responded, and he mentioned that they had an intern position open. Like I didn't even ask for a internship at the time. I was just mentioning I would love to learn more about what he does. He'd gone to the same school as me, and wanted an informational interview. And so wanted to sit down and have coffee.
Yeah.
And he immediately just responded back with like, "Hey, we actually have an intern position open coming up in the fall. How about you come in and just interview for it? I think you already showed a lot of initiative just by even sending a LinkedIn message." So I go in and I interview with him, and he offers me the job on the spot to intern at this family office.
Okay.
And so I interned there in the fall of my junior year, and while I was there, it was just kind of it was making a rich family richer, which was awesome. I mean, it was very exciting to be around ultra high net worth individuals, but in terms of like job satisfaction, I was kind of left unfulfilled. But I knew that I still wanted to work in finance and still kind of push for the high finance sort of roles. So
what were you doing in that internship? What were you doing there? Like just basic like research and looking at deals? What were you?
Yeah,
what types
it was.
of deals?
So most of what I was doing was due diligence for projects that the family's friends would push on them. So researching small community
That's
banks
actually a really
in the middle of nowhere.
That's a good internship though for like, I mean, coming from where you came from,
I mean,
like it's tough to find those.
It was fascinating because it gave you such a broad knowledge. And nobody really had, a lot of the projects I had, there wasn't a forged path for. So it was really me developing my own like due diligence strategy and kind of presenting as much information as I could possibly find with very little guidance, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's a family office, so you're left to fend for yourself. So okay, so you had that internship through the fall of your junior year, and then you were still kind of after. Had you already sent those 100 messages? Were you continuing to send them, or did you feel like defeated that you only got one? I mean, the one led to your internships. Did you keep going?
So I took a different approach during my junior year while I was interning there, and I had kind of made up my mind that even if I got a return, I wasn't going to come back. I was kind of over it and wanted to end it at the end of that semester. So I just got more involved with the investment club, got more involved with we had just hired a new professor who had actually worked in banking.
Okay.
So he was the only one at my school. And so I kind of latched on to him and got as much insight as I could from him and did more grassroots networking, I'd call it, kind of hang out with him whenever I could and meeting his friends and people that he would bring to our school to speak. He took us to a local CFA like meeting or something where they had recruiters at and companies that were hiring positions that wanted to hire CFAs or people who wanted to get a CFA at some point.
Got it. Okay.
And I ended up, so that was still in the fall. I think it was while I was still interning there. Yep. And I had met somebody who worked at a sell-side equity research firm and kept in contact with him throughout my spring semester. I was studying abroad at the time in Australia. And when I had gotten back, I had just kind of mentioned to him that I still hadn't had anything lined up for the fall. And he mentioned to me that they were still filling positions, and this is probably April timeframe. So
this is your senior year.
Went in and start my senior year.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I went into interview, was offered a position on one of the healthcare teams, and while interning there, it was just something that I couldn't see myself doing long term. It was very long hours, or long hours for what I was used to, I guess I should say. And
not long hours with the listeners. Long hours being 60 hours, 70 hours, or
people were routinely working like 7 to 8, 7 in the morning to 8 p.m., which was new for me. That was even interning. I was still kind of putting in not quite those hours, but long hours for being a student at the same time.
Right.
Because it was during my school year.
Oh, that's tough. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. And so while doing that, I'd kind of, again, made up my mind that, maybe this isn't the right path for me. This is very long hours. It's doing stock market research, which everybody knows what sell-side equity research is. And it wasn't something that I wanted to do long term. So I started looking around on campus for literally anything else I could possibly find. I kind of decided maybe it's not right for me to go into a higher finance. Maybe I should look for something that's more passion focused.
Why were you doing all these jobs during school? Like, what about your summers? Like, were you not doing stuff over the summer? Or were you working in other stuff?
I grew up really poor. And so I worked in a factory every summer. Got it. So, and then during school, I was actually an RA. I worked at the gym.
Got it. So you were grabbing anything you could get.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
I mentored a student with high functioning autism, and all that while interning, and then still studied abroad because Wall Street Oasis was telling me that's what everyone's doing. So it worked for me, though. I mean, honestly,
it was more interesting, right? You had more
experience.
You had interest. Well, that sounds amazing. I've never been to Australia. I'm sure it was incredible.
Yeah, it was.
So okay, so you're working in a factory.
I didn't know that people interned in the summer until reading. Like, none of my friends where I went to school, everybody went to school and then went home for the summers. Nobody stayed in the city. And so I just didn't know that that was even an option for me, because I couldn't afford to do an unpaid internship or even a low-paid internship where I had to pay for housing.
Right.
So I went back and lived at my parents' house and worked in the factories in the summer.
Can you say what type of factories? Was it like hard work, or was it?
Yeah, it was like manufacturing. They made machines. Like they made machines that made machines.
Got it. And so, so it's tough work, long hours as well.
Tough work, 40-hour weeks, clock in, clock out.
Yep.
How
was the pay? What was it, like 15, 20 bucks?
Yeah, it was like $12, $14. I think it was $12 my first summer, 14 by the time I finished, maybe 15 when I finished.
It's not horrible.
But
for a college.
Yeah, no, it wasn't bad at all. And I mean, it was kind of cool to get an experience that my parents are both blue collar workers, and so getting to see that side of things, especially when so many of my friends from high school and who I grew up with went on to work in factories and stay in sort of blue collar jobs, it kind of gave me that little extra motivation to put in harder work at school and know that that's not what I wanted to be doing.
Cool.
That was the big takeaway.
So you're doing that over the summer. You're going back to school. How are you affording school? Are you out just through the jobs that you had while you were in school?
So part of it was loans. A lot of it was being an RA took care of a lot of it. Working as many jobs as I could possibly find. I was flipping sneakers at the time. I'm not kidding.
You sound like Gary Vaynerchuk. You sound like Gary V.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. That's kind of the stuff that I was into back then. Sneakers were actually how I even found out I wanted to do finance at all. That's cool. It was weird. But yes, I was flipping sneakers. I was working as many jobs as I possibly could.
You're hustling.
My parents took out a second mortgage on the house to help pay for the rest of the difference that like the loans wouldn't take care of, and that I couldn't pay for myself.
Have you been able to pay them back yet?
I'm in the process of it right now.
Good.
Yeah,
they probably feel good that
they
feel good that it's coming back now, I bet.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. My parents did everything they possibly could for me. I can't thank them enough for how much they pushed me and supported me through everything. They really did everything they could.
So it sounds like you were floating a little bit, like you're trying to find your way. You do the equity research internship. You're like, it's still not very good. It's kind of long hours, and it's just stock market research. It wasn't really doing it for you. You didn't find a purpose at the family office position. So you said you just started grabbing any sort of job you could get, it sounds like, when you got back?
Yeah, I started like looking up any position I possibly could. And there's a major health system in my city that like they've treated my grandpa, they've treated family members, my mom's donated a kidney.
Oh, wow.
It's just been such an influential part of my family's life, and everyone I kind of knows somebody who's been treated there.
Yeah.
And so I found out they had a finance leadership development program that and this is still while I was interning at the equity research shop.
Got it. Okay.
And so I went and sat in on a presentation they did, and they talked about how exclusive this internship was, which kind of reminded me of the high finance sort of mentality, although it was nowhere near as competitive.
FLDPs are not easy.
Yeah.
So it's the finance leadership development programs at these corporate, Fortune 500 companies or these big corporations can be a great place to start your career and get a good skill set. But so you go in, you're kind of like, they're talking a big game, how competitive it is. And how are you doing at school at this point? Do you feel like you're competitive, or do you feel like you're a long shot?
I totally felt like a long shot. I called my mom after I sat through the presentation and told her, like, maybe this is what I want to do. And she was like, well, don't get your hopes up. Make sure you still keep putting in your work at the equity research shop.
Right.
She had no hope, which was funny because, like, they had supported me so much. She just didn't want me to get my hopes up and, not get – because, again, being from a small town and being from such a blue-collar family – that was the gold standard. This health system was like everybody knows what it is.
It's the Goldman Sachs of your town, of your city, of your area.
Yeah.
I get
Absolutely. Yeah. that means so much more to people that I know versus if you went on and worked in banking. One of the guys I know who actually did go on and work in banking, his mom would ask him why he couldn't come work at the local, actual bank in our hometown, as a bank teller.
I love it.
Nobody can conceptualize what it is, or not that they can't conceptualize it. They just don't know. They're not familiar.
Of course. Yeah. So that makes sense.
So I left that and kind of busted my butt to work with career services and everybody I could possibly know to redo my resume, make sure that my personal story and cover letter and all of the application packet was good to go.
Yep.
Turned it in and went through, I think it was 2 or 3 half day or full day interviews to get into the program.
Yep.
And when I finished the program, or when I finished turning in all the paperwork and everything, and I went through all the interviews, I was offered the job as one of 6, and it was like, holy cow, this is exactly what I want to do. And this is still in the fall, so I had a job lined up for the summer, which I know on Wall Street Oasis is very common, but in where I'm from, no one else. I was the first person I knew who had a job post college.
So you had a job for full time after you graduate.
Correct.
Yeah. So this was it felt early, 9 months, whereas a lot of kids on Wall Street Oasis are panicking if they don't have a sophomore internship.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I was offered the job in November for it to start the week after the 4th of July. So
got it.
I had plenty of time, and it kind of relieved a lot of stress for spring semester. But then let's go back
to the actual all the work you put in with the Career Center and all that. Did you the resume, and so you made it polished, but tell me about the actual interviews. Was it anything unexpected? Were there any good cop, bad cop, any interesting stories there where they challenged you, or was it more just fit or
so the first interview I went to was actually a 4-on-4 interview.
That's
it was
weird.
The weirdest thing I've ever been a part of. 4 interviewers, 4 interviewees, just all in one room.
That's so weird. I've never heard that.
It was the strangest thing, because it was raw competition. You're sitting there hearing what everyone else is saying, 2 answers, and you're trying to craft a narrative that outperforms the people sitting right next to you who you don't know.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was so strange.
So what type of questions would they ask, and then you'd go one by one answering it?
They would ask. I mean, most of the questions at this point were sort of not behavioral, but they were kind of name a time you name your strengths, name your weaknesses.
It's behavioral. Yeah, it's fit.
A time that you worked on a challenging project.
Right.
Stuff like that, where it's more finding out your critical thinking, or your fit of the company versus your critical thinking at this point.
Tell me, answer me this. Did you have stories prepared beforehand and stuff you could reference? You had prepped. Okay, good. So
absolutely.
You were ready.
So I searched. I didn't have the money to. This is funny, but I didn't have the money to pay for any of the Wall Street Oasis guides.
Yep.
But somebody I knew bought them, so I jacked them off of him.
Yeah. No worries.
And. So I had found all of these interview tips on mostly the questions before technicals.
Yep.
Because at this firm it's hospital, health system, they weren't really asking technical questions at this point.
Right.
It was mostly just, how do you prove that you had experiences, you can recognize what you did that improved your trajectory to get to where you are now. And so also with career services, and I mean, Google is one of the best resources. There is so much knowledge available on Google that as long as you can weed through what's good and what's bad, it can really help you to find out what questions people are coming up with, because very few firms, from my experience, are coming up with original questions.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times they're taking it straight off of Google. They're taking it straight from some HR website.
Yeah, and it's not even then, the variations are very minor, even if they're slightly different, and it's more about how polished you are in the delivery and how comfortable you are in your own skin, and just how genuine you come across as. Is it like a robot, or is it actually a convincing, is it a convincing
Yeah.
delivery? But so, okay, so you land the job. It's very exciting. Your family's happy. You have a full-time offer. I'm sure maybe you had some fun at college the last 6
Yeah.
months or 7 months.
I had fun my entire college. My
Good.
entire college experience was a fun time.
Good.
I just also had to work hard.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So you graduate, and tell me a little bit about how everything started out. What were the days like? How was it, like really intense at first? Hours, pay, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so when I first started, pay was 45, no bonus, nothing else. Great benefits. Wore a suit every day, so that was like, in my mind, as a new grad, that was the sign that I made it.
That's
I
awesome.
wore a suit every day.
Yeah.
Which quickly faded.
Yeah, quickly lost its luster.
Yeah, the days were kind of, for the first year, it was a rotational program. So every single day was kind of like 80 or 90% shadowing of what somebody else was doing in any functional finance department.
Interesting.
Between accounting, corporate development, FP&A, corporate finance, operational finance, IT.
How
much anything
how long
how
long in each one?
Yeah.
How long in each one? Like a week or 3 months or?
They tailored it for each one. So ones that they viewed as more important, something like accounting, we spent 2 months there because there's so much variety you can get there.
Yep.
Whereas something like when we were with corporate development, sort of like the M&A function, we were only there for 2 weeks, which they didn't. And the other thing was where the need was at the health system. So depending on which year you went through the program, if the need was in M&A, they might have you spend more time in M&A so they can figure out who they want to hire into that role. Or if the
But aren't you guys since you're shadowing, aren't you more of like a burden than like a help for that area?
Yeah, no, we were. So we were, our job expectations were you work 40 hours a week, mostly shadowing, doing a little bit of help with the most basic entry-level work you could possibly be given, and then probably 5 to 10 hours a week of whatever project you could pick up to show that like you wanted it a little bit more than the other people.
Interesting. So it's almost like a competitive. It's still, even though you made it in with these 6 people, you're still auditioning.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, it was a 12-month audition.
Oh my gosh.
We were guaranteed. They told us we were not guaranteed jobs after the full year, but everybody gets hired. So I think it was just basically to say that if you slacked off, if you didn't put in the work, you weren't going to be offered a job post fellowship.
It's just a way to keep you guys working hard and stuff. I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're doing the rotations. They're keeping you in audit for a couple months because they need more help there, and you're taking pretty basic tasks up here and there. And tell me, which ones did you like and which ones did you not like?
Yeah. So I kind of gravitated more towards the operational finance, getting to work more in like what would traditionally be like corporate finance.
Yep.
Because to me, that was where I was actually like making an impact. You got to work with the physicians, which at a major health system, it's kind of the smartest of the smart. You're working with people who are changing the entire industry of healthcare and really trying to push the envelope, and working with absolute geniuses as a 23-year-old was incredible to me.
Yeah.
And so I went through all the...
What type of stuff were you doing with them? Like, what do you mean you were like meeting with doctors to try and figure out what was happening like in the field, or like what in the operation?
Yeah, I mean, it was everything. So kind of jumping ahead out of the fellowship, I had taken one of those corporate finance roles. And I basically got to do I was one of 2 analysts that reported through this group of 800 doctors.
Wow.
And so when we had to do our residency match program, where like residents graduating from med school are applying to a residency.
Yep.
And there's this intense ranking program, and everybody wants to match with, like, as a health system, you want to have like a 100% match with the top X number of people that you're taking.
Right.
That way you can say, like, nobody turned you down.
Got it.
Essentially.
Yeah, no, I get it. The yield is 100% or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I helped to build a model to sort of like game the system with that, which every hospital does. I mean, and everywhere does that.
It's interesting.
But I got to do stuff like that, but I was also doing journal entries at month end. I was helping to figure out coding opportunities to be either downgrading coding to be appropriate so that we weren't overbilling for CMS,
Yep.
or increasing billing because we were doing the correct documentation and we had all the supporting like documents to be able to capture more revenue.
Got it. Okay.
I was also involved with the entire budgeting process for our department, heavily involved with any kind of analytics. So month end, anything that the physicians wanted for finance or for financials.
Yep.
I was the one pulling that together and getting to meet with them to explain what's going on in each of their locations. And our department was kind of treated, each department at our hospital was kind of treated like its own company. So I was essentially working with a physician who was like CEO of what we were doing. And then there was administrators and other people who were not physicians that were also in like leadership of our like
that makes
micro
sense.
company inside of the company.
That makes sense. And tell me about the specific tools you were like had to learn. Were you Excel, or were you doing other stuff where they're like certain proprietary systems that they used, the system used? Yeah,
so probably 90% of what I was doing was in Excel,
okay,
which I took when I first graduated. I realized how Excel heavy it was, and to me, or how Excel heavy all jobs were.
Yep.
At my school, they didn't teach Excel. So I was on my own. I knew nothing when I graduated college of how to actually use Excel.
Oh, man.
So one of the recommended programs I think I saw on Wall Street Oasis was the Wall Street Prep Excel course. I saw it was like $30, so I bought that.
Cool.
And I saw how easy it was to impress people with Excel.
Yeah.
It's kind of like solving a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
If you can solve a Rubik's Cube, it's not like much critical thinking. You remember an algorithm and you can do it forever.
Right.
Excel's the same way. If you're fast on a keyboard, everyone kind of trusts what you're doing, whereas if you're the one clicking around on the mouse,
so true,
people are kind of skeptical.
Throw the mouse away. That's to all the listeners.
Yeah.
Throw the mouse away if you're using
absolutely.
Excel.
Well, and if you're going into banking, I mean, you've already had that sort of training.
Yeah.
But in this corporate finance role, I was I probably knew Excel better than 80% of the people I worked with.
Oh, I'm sure
because
more,
everyone
yeah.
was just using the mouse.
Yeah.
No one was doing anything advanced because no one was doing self-taught learning outside of
good
what
for
was
you.
being told from their
good for you
bosses.
That's impressive.
So I was using mostly Excel, but then I also learned how like valuable it is to be able to pull, use, and manipulate data. And so we were using Microsoft SQL Server as well. And that was like the big skill that I think kind of set me apart and set me up for my next job pretty good, because most FP&A guys can build a model. Most people in finance can build a model and can do a lot of the like technical skills.
Right.
But from my experience, there's not a lot of people who understand like financial modeling and also can pull their own data and query everything that they want to do themselves, write code, and have access to everything at their fingertips.
So you learned a little SQL? You started learning a little SQL as well? Like being able to pull queries?
I would call myself beginner to intermediate, but that was kind of what set me apart at my job at the health system.
Very cool. So that allowed you to get promoted. What's the path for FLDP? So you do the year, and then they kind of like they say, okay, you're in this function. So you were in, you said corporate finance or operations, or it's the same thing?
To be honest, I think they were pretty similar at our company. Corporate finance and operations, they kind of were treated the same.
Okay.
So I was a financial analyst coming out of it. I think I was like financial analyst 2 or something.
Okay.
Then about a year out of that program, I was promoted to a financial analyst 3. And then after being promoted to an analyst three, probably 2 or 3 months later, like I wasn't really looking to leave. I was looking to continue growing and developing my skills at the system. And while doing that, I just was reached out from a private equity owned company, and they're small, looking to grow. They're building out their FP&A function. It's still in healthcare. And most other jobs that had reached out, they're kind of manufacturing jobs, construction, services. And none of those really appealed to me too much.
Yeah.
But when I was reached out to about this small, private equity owned, high growth company, it kind of just piqued my interest. And so I took the first interview, and my boss and I, my now current boss and I, just really hit it off. And I ended up making the move from there into the private equity owned company. And I went from a department that was bigger than the company I'm at now.
So tell me how what is that like? How has it been growing? Has the team grown since you've arrived? Is it more intense, less intense?
When I first joined the team, when I was at the health system, I had a huge network of finance professionals around me. My own department alone was 3 people. And it was 4, but we had an open position. So just in that department alone, we had 4 people. When I joined this company, it is our CFO, my boss, who was a senior analyst at the time, now is our director, and then myself coming in as a financial analyst. And so the team, I've been there for a year and a half now. We have an open position for a financial analyst, just like an entry-level role, that we're really taking our time to make sure that we're hiring somebody who fits, not just filling a position.
Yep.
My boss is a previous investment banker. Our CFO is a Harvard MBA. So at this company, the thing that was big to me was being surrounded by people who were a little more high performing than what I had experienced so far in terms of finance.
Got it.
People who could really help me get to the next level, not necessarily just continue to grow at the same organization.
So tell me, do you mind sharing a little bit about like pay? So you're 45 when you first started, and then you got promoted a couple times, or one time, a couple times, 2 times?
Yeah, so
how did it
I was at 45 during the FLDP.
Yep.
When you came out of the FLDP, they bumped you to 55. When I was promoted about a year after that, I went to, I think it was low 60s, maybe 63 or something.
Yep.
And this is there's like merit raises each year on top of all of this, like 2% or something.
Yeah.
And then, so I was at around 63, and when I left to come to this company, I entered at 70, and my old employer countered and tried matching at 70, but I just wanted to move on to something else at that point. And everybody on Wall Street Oasis recommends you do not accept a counter offer. So that was, again, it's even in my career post-grad, Wall Street Oasis has continued to be like that mentor that I've never been able to have. I'm not kidding.
You should have reached out, man. We have mentors. We have over 300 mentors waiting for you. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. Well, I know that now.
Well, now you're one of them. So.
But yeah, so I looked to Wall Street Oasis. They said don't accept a counter offer. So I took the $70,000 offer at my new company, at the private equity owned company.
Great.
And
it's a big jump.
Immediately starting out, I think I was only there for 6 months, and then I was bonused, which for coming from a health system, that's unheard of. Nobody gets a bonus in healthcare, at least in most healthcare organizations, when you're actually working with patients, not on like the pharmaceutical end or anything.
So tell me, after that 6 months, what was that bonus? Like 10,000, 5,000? What was it?
$1,800.
Hey, it's something.
Hey, I mean,
you weren't used to it before. Yeah, you weren't.
Yeah, I signed the offer, not thinking I was getting a bonus. That was big to me.
Right.
And so hours at this company, I mean, I work anywhere from 40 to 60 hours.
Yep. During
the workday, during business hours. It's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's super casual. You don't have to wear a suit anymore.
Yep.
My boss is only a couple of years older than me, and our CFO is only in his early 40s probably.
That's awesome.
And so it's a younger team. Everybody's hungry for growth and moving forward. And so after I was bonused to $1,800, a couple months later, I was offered, or they promoted me to a senior financial analyst.
Great.
And it took me up to 78, and now I actually have a bonus in my contract.
That's awesome. And you're living in an extremely low cost of living area.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My cost of living is basically nothing. I pay $800 for rent.
That's amazing.
Which, when you start running the numbers on what people make in my city in the Midwest, versus what people are making in New York City, and then you look at the cost of living.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty comparable. I mean, it's a nice living, and it's a nice life.
Yeah, for sure, man. You're not. The good part is,
and we have grass.
You have grass. You can get your parents paid back. Everything. Is there any outstanding debt? Any student loans that you're still chipping away at, or just?
I think I have $5,000 of student loans left.
That's great.
Before like 40 to my parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that jump from 45 to almost 80 is like that's debt money, because that first 45 is kind of pay your bills.
Yep.
That's you're getting by. You're not living a lavish life, but 80 in my city is.
You're doing very well for yourself.
It's a good living. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, it's a nice life.
That's awesome, man.
Especially when you factor in the hours, 40 to 60 hours a week, and almost all of it is during business hours.
And it's casual.
It's not bad.
That's great, man. And so it sounds like you're enjoying it there. What's in store for the future? Any plans?
Yeah. So for now, I mean, I want to stay on for the eventual sale and acquisition, or whatever ends up happening with our company.
Mm-hmm.
The private equity investment, I think, was only a couple of years ago, and so we still maybe have a couple more years before we hit that. We're
exit.
Still waiting on that next boom to get us to that next level, but we're one of the dominant players in the market right now, and I see us keep growing month over month. We're already a profitable company, that's huge. And I don't know. I mean, I want to keep developing my skills in finance. When I joined this company, one of my big things was I wanted to learn financial modeling, which I know on Wall Street Oasis is not the norm. A lot of my path hasn't been what most people are experiencing on Wall Street Oasis.
Yeah.
But learning financial modeling at 26, 27, it's wild of how much value you can add when you didn't learn it at 23 from somebody who's been doing it for 25 years, who maybe has an older, dated way of doing it, or isn't as data heavy. Learning data was probably one of the biggest things I've done in my career, because when I first joined my company, I was able to immediately add value, because my boss can build the
with the SQL, with the queries, you mean, being able to pull the data and quickly run analyses? Yeah, that's huge.
Being able to pull data and then being able to use data. So when I first joined the company, my boss was doing everything with sum ifs, count ifs. It was a lot of formula-based stuff, and even just introducing pivot tables was crazy. it sounds funny. I mean, but knowing Microsoft Access was another big thing. Being able to immediately come in and just kind of open up a new world that nobody had really had as much access to data as they had.
It's huge. It's huge,
before.
Especially for a fast-growing company that's small. Like you being able to bring all those skills to the table just make you super valuable, which is why you got promoted and bonused. They recognize that.
The other, being able to translate between finance and IT, I think, is another big skill set that gets overlooked a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because IT people can speak the real technical details.
Yep.
Whereas my boss was able to tell me what he always wanted, and he's always like, IT can't do it. IT can't do it. And then if you could just speak it in a way that IT understands, IT knows exactly what you're asking for, and they're like, of course we could do that. I didn't know that's what he meant.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
so
like the
just being
communication
able to bridge
barrier.
that gap.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, the developers are like, what is he talking about? He's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
So
So now a lot of my work is it's still in Excel, still doing tons of Excel. Most of it is ad hoc projects for the CFO and CEO,
yep,
as well as our board of directors. I am involved in I build our entire monthly board of directors presentation, or quarterly, I should say.
yep,
And it's just a lot of it's reporting, some analytics. We're just getting to that point of being able to do more like predictive analytics versus reactive analytics, and looking at what happened and moving towards what will happen.
right.
Beyond just like the financial forecast. Financial forecast, obviously everybody does that, but being able to forecast what's happening to patients, what disease states people have, who your sickest patients are, that's kind of
Interesting.
that
So
next
more at the
level thing
analytics at the patient level to help the forecasting. So it's like a more granular, high level prediction.
Yeah. Well,
Got it.
and it's also more for helping our outreach. So we're kind of a population health pharmacy where we're trying to one of our biggest value adds is in like cutting costs from like Medicare, CMS, insurance companies, like cutting real costs out of the healthcare industry because patients are staying healthier by using our pharmacy.
Oh, very
and
cool.
so it's a lot of, if you know who your sickest patients are going to be in a year, you know which patients you need to be doing outreach with in order to actually drive that real value to keep people healthy and to keep people not sick and not in the hospital. It's an all-around win for everybody.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, that's great. This has been really interesting. Can you anything before we call it that you'd like to share? Any advice you would give your younger self before we call it?
I'm trying to think. Advice for my younger self.
if you could go back and say, unbreakable glass, you got to do this. Or do you feel like you've, for the most part, kind of been true to yourself and followed what you wanted?
Yes, I think I would have just allowed myself, like, if I could go back and tell myself when I was a sophomore or freshman to, one, become a little more educated, like do more outreach, or like learn a little bit more when I was younger, when I was like on my own, even though I didn't have a ton of guidance.
Yep.
Like, if I could have had that foresight to like do more research on my own, I might have been able to find this path so much sooner that to me is more rewarding and fulfilling. And also just letting my younger self know that Wall Street Oasis, like what everyone's doing on there, that might be the right path for some people, but it doesn't have to be the right path for me. And even though I use the site every single day, it's just like, you don't have to go into investment banking. You don't have to work in high finance. You can have value add jobs that make you incredibly happy in no-name cities with no-name companies that
I love it.
Truly provide a lot of value and
it's a very important
message. To work for.
It's a very important message, and I think one that gets lost in the hysteria of the track, and the track being investment banking, private equity, hedge funds. You see it from kids trying to break into banking. They don't get there. It's like they're devastated. It's like you can still build an incredibly successful career in corporate finance and corporate development, and use a lot of different skills, and it can be rewarding. So I think it's
Absolutely.
very myopic, very short-sighted. Unfortunately, it's something that I feel like the site has not done a good enough job at making sure your stories like yours need to be highlighted more. So I'm happy you decided to come on here, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing for a lot of the high performers on Wall Street Oasis is just that, like, when you're competing in investment banking and in a lot of these high finance jobs, you're competing with some of the best of the best. And whereas when you go to corporate finance and you start moving into more of these like operational finance roles, where sort of like what my career path has been, you have the ability to stand out so much more by leveraging what you learn on Wall Street Oasis at a firm that doesn't have other people on Wall Street Oasis.
Right.
Because it's net value add to the company and to your career path.
For sure. I think they're very thirsty for high performers, whereas investment banking is filled with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can
find plenty of people working 100-hour weeks in investment banking. It's rare to find somebody who wants to work after 5 o'clock in any of the companies I've worked at.
That's very true. Great, man. Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for all the details, the stories, everything. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.